Hello friends, I'm Stacy with Crochet Kitten, and today we're going to talk about designing your own amigurumi. So last week I challenged my viewers to guess what this little guy was, and if you guessed wolf, you are correct. I made this for my younger daughter. We call her our little wolf pup because she's the only person in our family born in December instead of August, so she is our lone wolf. But today I want to talk to you about my process for designing amigurumi. Believe it or not, I kind of just jump into it without a whole lot of planning. There is some planning involved before you get into it, like looking at design inspiration. What kind of shapes are you going to need? But as far as planning it out in advance, like to the stitches, I don't do that because I kind of like to have a feel for how the shaping is going to go. And a lot of times you're not going to know exactly what the shaping is going to look like until you dive in and do it. Now, when I design my wearable garments, that's an entirely different process. I've got spreadsheets, calculations, the whole work. But for my amigurumi, it's a little bit more free form and feel for it. So I wanted to kind of talk about that today so that if you are interested in designing your own amigurumi, you can jump in and get started. So this is my next little guy, and these are going to be part of a new series that I'm working on. I'm going to publish a bunch of their patterns together. So you're getting kind of a sneak peek here. So this is that Lion brand Lazy Days yarn that I used in my last video. And as I had mentioned before, I really prefer natural fibers unless I'm making things for children. Because if your children are anything like mine, they're going to get messy, and these synthetic fibers are just so much easier to wash. All right, so this is Lazy Days. It is a polyester yarn. And what's nice about this for amigurumis is it's that chainette type yarn, so it's not going to split. It's got a nice soft feel. It's got good stitch definition here. All right, so when I start any of my amigurumis, you're going to start with a magic loop. So the way we do that is I wrap the yarn around these two fingers. So I've got my little loop there. Then I'm going to put my hook through that loop and pull my yarn through. See? Right now, before we pull that down, we're going to work 6 single crochets in there. So we're going to start with a chain 1 to get up to that level. And now we're going to do our 6 single crochets. So 1, 2. You see how I'm working right in that loop? So that's not a stitch, that's just a loop. 3, 4, 5, 6 single crochets. Okay. Most any amigurumi pattern that you use or find online is going to follow this basic beginning. So we've got our 6 single crochets in that magic loop. Now we're going to cinch that knot down. There we go. So that's my first round right there. Now, like I said, most amigurumis are going to start the same way, with the magic loop or a chain 2 and working 6 single crochets in that second chain from the hook. But they almost always start with 6 stitches in that first round. 6 seems to be that magic number that makes that nice perfect circle. So when you go to do your increase rounds, you still have that nice circular shape. Now, if you want to keep going out in a nice flat shape until your amigurumi or whatever body part this is going to be is as wide as you want it to be. So the way you increase so that it stays flat is you're going to add 6 each round. And you want to do that evenly if you want it to increase evenly. So for our second round, if I'm adding 6, 6 plus 6 is 12. That means I need to work 2 stitches in every single stitch of the first round. So 1, 2 in that first stitch, 3, 11, 12. There we go. All right, so that is my second round. You can see it's still that nice circular shape and it's still nice and flat. So right now, it's as we're adding stitches, it's growing outward and it's not going down at all. It's staying nice and flat. So if I want to keep going outwards to make it even wider, as I said, we're going to keep adding 6 each round. So 12 plus 6 is 18. So this time, when we increase, I'm going to do 1 in this stitch, and then 2 in the next stitch, and then 1, and then 2, 1 and 2, and that will give me 18 stitches in the next round. Now the last round I counted as I was going, but as you're getting to rounds that have more stitches, you're going to want to add, just mark the first stitch of each round with a stitch marker there. That way you know when you get to the end of the round. And that way, instead of counting up to 18, I'm just counting 1, 2, 3. So I have 1 stitch in that single crochet and then 2 stitches in that one. And I just count 1, 2, 3 all the way around. All right, so I've done 1 in one stitch and 2 in the next stitch all the way around. And now I have 18 stitches in this round. As you can see, it's still a nice circle, still nice and flat. So if I want to make it even bigger, you would just keep going in that pattern. So add 6 every round and kind of evenly spacing where your increases are going. So then once you've decided that it's wide enough, then you can start working evenly. And what that means is you're going to work 1 stitch in every single crochet. So that's going to stop it from growing outwards and make it start growing downwards. So let's do that for this next round here. So as you can see, this is a very free-form, friendly technique. This is why I don't do much planning ahead of time when I'm planning out my amigurumis. And sometimes the shape doesn't turn out quite how I want it to be, and that's okay, because you can always, the beauty of crochet is you could just take a round or 2 out and redo it the way you want it to be done. I just feel for these sculpting type projects, it's a lot better when you kind of work with it in real time instead of trying to plan it out so much in advance. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't plan in advance if that's a better way of working for you. I'm just saying it doesn't always have to be that way. For me, one of the joys of making amigurumi is discovering what they're going to look like when they're done. Okay, so now you can see it's still a circle, it's still circular, but it's starting to curl in on itself because there's not enough give in the yarn to keep it going flat. So now it's starting to grow down. And you would just work evenly until your piece is as long as you want it to be. So I'm sure by now you figured out that if you want to make it wider, you're adding the same number of stitches each round. So if you want to make it narrower, you would do the opposite. You would subtract an even number of stitches each round. So once you have it as long as you want it to be, now you're going to start decreasing 6 every round. So I have 18 in this row. I want to have 12. So I'm going to use my stitch markers again. Actually, 12 is easy to count. We'll stick with it this way. All right, so I've got 1 stitch, and then I'm going to decrease my next stitch. And have you seen this invisible decrease technique? So what you do, it's just a regular decrease, but instead of going under both loops, you're just going to go under the front loop of the first stitch and under the front loop of the second stitch. Oops. Try that again. Front loop, and then just do a regular single crochet there. All right, so that was my second stitch. We've got 1, 2. 3. And the next one's my decrease stitch. 4, 12. There we go. And you see now, my little shape is starting to close in on itself. Now, before you close your piece in all the way, you'll want to stuff it. And lately I have taken to, as I said, I really prefer natural fibers, so I've started, instead of using polyfill, which is a type of plastic, using cotton for my stuffing. Now, if this is something that you plan on throwing in the wash, you do need to use polyfill because that cotton stuffing is never going to dry. But if it's the kind of thing where you think, if it gets dirty, I can just kind of spray the outside and scrub it down, then go ahead and use cotton. Why not? All right, so that is really all there is to designing your basic amigurumi shape. So my basic amigurumi form that I base all of my amigurumi designs off of, just in case you want to kind of follow along or base your amigurumis off of this, is I increase to 42 all the way around, and then I work evenly for 3 rows, and then I decrease down to 12, and then increase again to 24, work evenly for 3 rows, and then decrease all the way back down to 6. And that's my basic amigurumi form. And when I'm adding the body parts, it's just the same thing. Different widths, different lengths. So for example, for these little front arms, I just stayed at 6 and worked evenly for 9 rows. And those are his arms. The same with his little feet, that's just 6. And his little tail. Now, you'll notice that the tail seems to have a different rate of increase here. So you can control how steep your increases are by adding a row worked evenly in between. So if you do multiple rows worked even, you're going to have a nice, like, straight up and down increase or shape there. But if you don't want it to be straight up and down, and you don't want it to be worked horizontally, flat either. See, this is more of like a 45-degree angle. I got that by working my increase row and then doing 1 row even. And then I worked another increase row and then 1 row even. And for the decreases here, same way. I did 1 decrease row and then a row worked even, and then another increase row. So that gives me more of like a 45-degree angle there instead of straight up and down or straight flat out. So that's how you can kind of control the shape. And the same thing, I did the same thing with his nose here. Now, sometimes I don't have an example to show you on these ones, but let's say you want the back to be flat, but you want the front to be more angled. How would you do that? So what I would do is do multiple rows. So multiple rows worked even on the back, but on the front, you could increase every other row. And that would give you more of a sloped shape on the front while still having it more up and down on the back. If you do that, I would highly recommend using your stitch markers to mark where your front and back are so that you don't get lost in your pattern. But that's it for our basic amigurumi tutorial. So over the next several weeks, several months, we're going to talk a lot about pattern designing. So please continue to tune in for these videos. And if you would like a printable version of what I just explained on this video, you can go to crochetkitten.com and download my basic amigurumi pattern. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week.